In 1988, the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655 over the Persian Gulf, killing 290 civilians. Iran's response was to sink 0 American ships, launch 0 missiles, and spend the next 36 years building a military specifically designed to make sure that never happens again. They can't match American firepower, they know that, but they've spent 4 decades turning the Persian Gulf into the most dangerous body of water on Earth for any navy that isn't theirs. Zelzal. These are unguided rockets by the thousands, built on the philosophy that when you cannot afford precision, you buy volume. The Zelzal family has no guidance systems and no terminal seekers. They go exactly where ballistic trajectory and physics say they will go. With nearly 4,000 in service, they are useless for hitting a specific building, but they are devastating for turning an entire area into a series of craters, serving as a poor man's strategic weapon for a military that prioritizes area saturation over surgical strikes. Fateh 110. This is the trunk of the entire Iranian solid fuel missile program, and everything else in their inventory eventually branched off this one design. In September 2018, 6 of these hit an opposition headquarters in Iraq and reportedly struck the exact room where the leadership was meeting during a conference. It is a road mobile threat that can launch with almost no warning, and with over 4,500 in service, it has proven that Iran's accuracy is no longer just propaganda, it is a real-world combat reality. Zulfahar, a larger, longer-ranged evolution of the Fateh design. The Zulfahar was built to extend Iran's reach to 700 kilometers. It saw its first real action in 2017 when it was fired at targets in eastern Syria as retaliation for a terrorist attack in Tehran. While some missed their marks, the ones that landed proved that Iran can now strike moving targets and specific infrastructure across international borders without ever leaving their own territory. Shahab 3. This is the missile that changed the entire map of the Middle East and made regional powers spend billions on defense. Based on a North Korean design, it was Iran's first credible threat capable of reaching Tel Aviv, shifting the entire strategic calculus of the region. It is a liquid-fueled veteran that takes hours to prepare for launch, making it vulnerable to discovery, but its symbolic value as the long arm of Iranian deterrence has justified keeping it in service even as more advanced systems take its place. Sejil and Sejil 2. Solid fuel changes the game for defense planners because it eliminates the launch warning that liquid fuel missiles provide. A Sejil does not need a massive convoy of fueling trucks that satellites can spot. It sits in a hidden silo or on a mobile launcher, ready to roll out and fire within minutes. Iran struggled to manufacture these in large numbers because making solid fuel at this 2,000 kilometer scale is an engineering nightmare. But the ones they have represent the most dangerous no-notice threat in their inventory. Khorram Shar, the wide, blunt nose cone of this missile, is a detail that keeps every intelligence agency in the world nervous. Based on North Korean technology, it is designed to carry a massive payload over 2,000 kilometers. And that extra space in the front is perfectly sized for a first-generation nuclear warhead. Whether Iran can build them in serious numbers remains a question, but the dimensions alone are a deliberate message about the kind of damage this missile was built to deliver. HY-2 Silkworm. This Chinese anti-ship missile is a slow, predictable veteran of the 1980s that most modern air defenses can shoot down with ease. However, Iran's plan isn't to fire one. It is to fire 100. By positioning hundreds of these ancient silkworms along the Strait of Hormuz, they intend to overwhelm a modern navy through sheer volume, hoping that a massive swarm of obsolete missiles will be enough to find a gap in $1 billion destroyer's defenses. Noor. After America pressured China to stop selling missiles to Tehran in the 90s, Iran simply reverse-engineered the ones they had and started building the Noor. It proved its lethality in 2006, when a version of it nearly sank an Israeli corvette off the coast of Lebanon, killing a sailor and changing naval warfare in the region forever. It is the workhorse of Iran's coastal defense, a sea-skimming missile that flies low to stay under radar and forms the primary keep-out zone for any navy trying to operate near Iranian shores. Kosar 1, 2, and 3. Iran has spent decades iterating on the Noor design, attempting to close the gap between their domestic industry and the cutting edge of anti-ship technology. Each successive version brings better guidance and more reliable electronics, representing the stepping stones of Iran's missile development. While they are not as famous as the heavier systems, these are the missiles that Iranian crews train with every day, refining the tactics they would use to shut down the world's most important shipping lanes. Khalij Fars. This is the Persian Gulf missile, a carrier killer that doesn't skim across the water, but instead drops onto its target from above at 4 times the speed of sound. Built on a Fateh 110 body and equipped with an electro-optical seeker, it is designed to hit moving ships at their most vulnerable point, the deck. It is an incredibly difficult shot to make, but if it works, it gives an invader almost zero time to react before 600 kilograms of high explosive arrives from the sky. Abu Mahdi. Named after the militia leader killed alongside Soleimani, this is Iran's longest-range anti-ship missile. It is a cruise missile designed to hunt carrier groups from over 1,000 kilometers away, using advanced navigation and waypoint technology to fly unpredictable paths that bypass naval defenses. It is a statement of intent. Iran is no longer content with just defending its own coast. They want the capability to threaten an enemy fleet before it even enters the region. Air defense is the whole ballgame. Bavar, 373. When Russia canceled an S-300 order in 2010 due to sanctions, Ayatollah Khamenei personally ordered the defense industry to build their own long-range shield. The result is the Bavar, a name meaning belief, with a designation positioned deliberately between Russia's S-300 and S-400 systems. It uses phase array radars and Sayad-4 missiles to reach targets over 200 kilometers away. And Iran claims it can track stealth aircraft like the F-35 from beyond its borders. Whether it truly matches the Russian hardware remains unproven in combat, but the fact that a sanctioned nation built a functional long-range system at all remains a point of intense interest for Western analysts. S-300 and S-300 PMU-2. Russia finally delivered 4 of these batteries in 2016, after years of broken contracts and diplomatic delays. These represent the premium end of the arsenal, legitimate Russian hardware, rather than reverse-engineered copies, capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously, out to 200 kilometers. They are the heavy hitters of the network, providing a sophisticated, long-range layer that sits at the top of the integrated air defense strategy. Talash. Iran built over 40 batteries of this system by combining different components and adding their own modifications to create a uniquely Persian long-range hybrid. It uses upgraded radars and missiles inspired by the American and Russian technology they have studied or captured over the decades. The Talash provides the overlapping redundancy that makes it difficult for an attacker to find a clean gap in the radar coverage. Sayad and Khordad, 15 family. This medium to long-range system proved its lethality in June 2019, when it blew a US Navy Global Hawk drone out of the sky at 60,000 feet. That single shot nearly started a global conflict and proved that Iran's domestic missiles actually work against high-altitude targets. The Sayad missile family features progressively better guidance and longer ranges, all integrated into mobile platforms like the Khordad 15 that can shoot and relocate before an enemy can find the launch site. S-200 Fajr 8 and S-200 Gare. These are ancient Soviet relics from the 1960s that have been kept alive through decades of constant upgrades. While the S-200 has a massive 300-kilometer reach, it was designed to hit slow bombers flying predictable paths, not modern fighters with advanced electronic warfare. Iran operates about 10 batteries of these monsters, but they are fundamentally obsolete against the modern Air Force and serve more as a long-range deterrent than a precision shield. Arman. Unveiled as a specialized answer to ballistic missile threats, this mobile system is claimed to intercept incoming projectiles at ranges exceeding 120 kilometers. Details are sparse because the military guards the specs of its newest gear. But the Arman represents a shift in strategy, moving beyond just shooting down aircraft and attempting to hit incoming missiles before they reach their targets. Rod 1, Rod 2, and Khordad 3. These medium-range platforms form the numerical core of the air defense network with over 400 batteries positioned across the country. They are built to fill the gap between short-range point defense and long-range strategic systems, covering the altitudes where most combat aircraft actually operate. By reverse engineering foreign designs and mass producing them, Iran has created a no-fly zone, where low-altitude penetration is extremely dangerous. Mersad. After the revolution, Iran spent 40 years keeping their American-built Hawk missiles operational, despite a total lack of spare parts. The Mersad is their upgraded version, featuring improved electronics and locally produced missiles that still use the basic American design. With 300 batteries in service, these systems remain relevant simply because there are so many of them, proving that even an aging shield is better than none when defending cities and fixed infrastructure. MIM-23 Hawk. The Shah bought these American missiles in the 70s, and during the war with Iraq, they were credited with shooting down at least 40 aircraft, including 9 in a single day. When their specialized Phoenix missiles ran out, Iranian engineers got desperate enough to strap these ground-based Hawks onto the wings of F-14 Tomcats under Project Sejil. It is exactly the kind of insane engineering you do when you are fighting for survival and nobody will sell you the right tools for the job. 2K-12 Kub. Keeping Soviet hardware from the 60s operational requires a constant cycle of cannibalizing broken batteries and manufacturing parts from scratch. These medium-range systems are outdated, but they cover enough territory that no pilot can simply write them off. Yazara 3. Desert Storm taught a brutal lesson about what happens when an air defense network cannot stop a high-altitude strike. Iran's response was to make low-level attacks so costly that they aren't worth the risk. By forcing aircraft to choose between staying high where the long-range missiles can reach them or dropping low into these concentrated fire zones, every approach becomes a calculated gamble for the pilot. Herds 9. This is the final layer of defense, built to protect the most critical command centers and nuclear facilities when every other shield has failed. It is a reverse-engineered version of a Chinese system designed for close-in protection, where a few seconds are all that stand between a successful strike and total loss. Rapier. These British missiles were bought by the Shah in the 70s, but the most interesting part of their history happened during the war with Iraq. Iranian officers claimed their Rapier crews shot down more aircraft during that conflict than the British managed in the Falklands. Tor. This mobile Russian system is highly capable against cruise missiles and precision weapons, but it is best known for a tragedy in early 2020. An Iranian Tor crew, on high alert and expecting American retaliation, shot down a Ukrainian airliner minutes after takeoff from Tehran. The missile worked exactly as designed, illustrating the dangerous reality of automated air defense when human crews are under extreme pressure. Misa family. 5 kilometers of reach from a shoulder launcher does not sound like much until you realize how many helicopters have been downed by exactly this kind of weapon. Iran fields these in massive numbers, copying and improving on Russian and Chinese designs to ensure that every ridgeline and rooftop is a potential threat to low-flying aircraft. Sohail. Iran looked at the standard shoulder launcher and decided that one missile was not enough to guarantee a kill. The Sohail mounts 4 of these missiles together, meaning a low-flying aircraft doesn't just get a warning, it gets a ripple of fire. Positioned around key facilities, it exists to overwhelm an aircraft's countermeasures through sheer volume at close range. Qayyam. This system was built specifically with the attack helicopter in mind, with an 8-kilometer reach that can threaten a pilot trying to hover behind terrain. It signals that the military thinks in layers, ensuring that even the specialized tank hunters have a dedicated counter waiting for them in the trees. Zu-23-2. This twin 23mm gun is the most common sight on any modern battlefield, often seen bolted to the back of a pickup truck. It is cheap everywhere and brutally simple. Against drones and slow-moving aircraft, the massed fire from dozens of these guns can turn the sky into a wall of lead that you simply do not want to fly through. Samavat. This is the Iranian version of the 35mm Orlikhan gun, pushing heavy shells out to roughly 4 kilometers. It is often paired with radar fire control, providing a cost-effective way to swat down cheap drones without wasting a $1 million missile on a target that isn't worth the fuel. ZSU-57-2. This tracked twin 57mm gun dates back to the Cold War and lacks the sophisticated sensors of a modern platform. What it does have is a large, high-explosive shell that hits with far more authority than smaller calibers. Positioned correctly, it is a blunt instrument used to punish any aircraft flying a predictable attack run. The Shilka was designed to protect Soviet armored columns from NATO air power, and it earned a reputation for being far more dangerous than its age suggests. With 4 radar-guided barrels firing 23mm rounds at a blistering rate, it remains an ideal tool for the low-altitude fight. Mesbah 1. This system looks like a solid wall of barrels pointed at the sky, designed to be the absolute final layer of defense. With a short range of only about 1.5 kilometers, it exists for that desperate moment when a cruise missile or a bomb has slipped through every other shield and the crew has only seconds to react. Sayir KS-19. While this 100mm anti-aircraft gun looks like it belongs in a museum. Iran modernized it to keep it relevant in the 21st century. With upgraded fire control, it can still reach out to 8 kilometers and put heavy, lethal shells into the path of an oncoming strike. It is a reminder that in Iranian air defense, even the oldest steel is still part of the fight. Karar. Iran unveiled this tank in 2017 and called it their answer to the M1 Abrams, which is the kind of claim that sounds impressive. Until you remember, Iran hasn't fought a conventional tank battle since 1988. The Karar is essentially a T-72 chassis that Iran rebuilt with modern fire control, explosive reactive armor, and a laser warning system. It's their most advanced indigenous tank. And while it won't win any fights against actual Abrams crews, it's a hell of a lot better than the Soviet hand-me-downs they've been running for the last 40 years. T-72S. Iran bought hundreds during the Iran-Iraq War when they were desperate, and they kept buying more afterward when nobody else would sell them armor. The T-72S is the export version, which means it's missing some of the better armor and fire control the Soviets kept for themselves, but it still throws a 125mm round downrange, and Iran has kept them running through sanctions and spare parts shortages that would have killed most tank fleets. T-72 Z-Safir 74. When you can't buy new tanks and the ones you have are falling apart, you start upgrading what you've got. The Safir 74 is Iran's attempt to modernize the T-72S with better fire control systems, upgraded armor packages, and whatever improvements their defense industry could reverse engineer or build domestically. It's still a T-72 at its core, but Iran learned from watching American thermal sights tear through Iraqi armor in Desert Storm, and they've been trying to close that technology gap ever since. Zulfikar MBT. Iran looked at their T-72s and M60s and decided to build their own tank, using whatever worked from both. The result looks like someone welded a T-72 turret onto an M60 hull, which isn't far from the truth. Different variants exist. The Zulfikar 1 and Zulfikar 3 have different turret designs and armor configurations, but they're all essentially Iran's attempt to prove they can build tanks without foreign help. Production numbers have always been unclear, and most analysts think Iran struggled to manufacture these at scale. But the Zulfikar project taught Iranian engineers how to maintain domestic armored vehicle production, which matters more than the tanks themselves. M60A1 Samsam. Before the 1979 revolution, the Shah bought American equipment, and that included M60 Patton tanks. After the revolution, Iran suddenly owned hundreds of American tanks they could no longer get parts for. So they did what any country under sanctions does. They started making their own parts and upgrading the tanks themselves. The Samsam upgrade adds Iranian-made fire control, upgraded armor, and whatever improvements they could manage without American support. Iran keeps them running because a 1960s American tank that actually works is still more useful than a modern tank that doesn't exist. Mobarez. The British sold Iran over 1,000 Chieftain tanks back when the Shah was in power, and the money was good. After 1979, those chieftains became orphans. No British support, no spare parts, and a design that was already maintenance intensive when everything worked perfectly. Iran responded by cannibalizing the ones they couldn't fix to keep the others running, then started producing their own parts and upgrades. The Mobarez is their modernized chieftain, with Iranian fire control systems, upgraded armor, and modifications that let them keep using a British tank the British stopped supporting over 40 years ago. Moving on to infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. BMP-2. The Soviet Union built this infantry fighting vehicle to give mechanized troops enough firepower to keep up with tanks, and Iran bought them because, for a long time, nobody else was selling. The 30mm autocannon and AT-5 missile launcher made it a legitimate threat to light armor and infantry positions during the Iran-Iraq War. BMP-1. This earlier version of the family is where the age of the fleet becomes impossible to ignore. The armor on this aluminum coffin won't stop a modern anti-tank round, and its 73mm gun is a low-velocity weapon that most militaries retired decades ago. Iran still operates them because throwing away a functional armored vehicle is a luxury they simply don't have. A platform that can move infantry under even a sliver of protection is still a hell of a lot better than an unarmored truck that offers none. Haidar. When the global supply lines dried up, the defense industry stopped looking at foreign catalogs and started looking at their own workshops. This indigenous attempt to manufacture a combat vehicle without Soviet support uses reverse-engineered components and local steel to fill the gaps in the motor pool. It carries a full squad and mounts a heavy machine gun, proving that Iran can build a functional tracked platform even if the result isn't going to win any beauty contests at an international arms expo. M113, A1, and M577. Before the revolution, The United States sold Iran thousands of these armored personnel carriers. And after 1979, they became orphans in a massive fleet with no factory support. We call the M113 the aluminum box on tracks because it's simple, cramped, and offers just enough protection to keep small arms fire at bay. The M577 is the command variant with that distinctive tall roof for radios and maps. EE-11 Urutu. Brazil sold these six-wheeled amphibious carriers to Iran during the 1980s when most Western countries had slammed the door on arms sales. The Urutu can swim across rivers and move with better speed on paved roads than tracked vehicles, making it a versatile tool for Iran's varied terrain. Brazil's willingness to trade during the war meant Iran got equipment when options were thin, and they've kept these rattlesnakes operational, despite the fact that finding parts for Brazilian gear has gotten progressively harder for 40 years. Bora. Iranian engineers looked at their aging fleet and decided to build their own version domestically rather than stay dependent on cannibalizing old American or Soviet gear. This Persian remix is essentially a reverse-engineered hybrid, taking the layout of ABMP and giving it a makeover with locally produced components. Tosan. Iran took the British Scorpion light tanks they had bought before the revolution and decided to build their own version with a bigger gun. The result is the Tosan, which looks almost identical to a Scorpion, except it mounts a 90mm gun instead of the original 76mm. Unveiled in the late 2000s as proof of domestic manufacturing, the production numbers have always been murky, with most observers believing only a few were ever built. This project functioned more as a demonstration of Iran's reverse engineering capabilities than as a meaningful addition to their armored forces. FV-101 Scorpion. The Shah bought these British light reconnaissance tanks in the 1970s because they were fast, mobile, and perfect for screening operations, ahead of heavier armor. The aluminum armor on a Scorpion means it will not survive a serious tank duel, but it was never designed to. Its job is to scout ahead, find the enemy, and get out before the shooting starts. Makran IFV. Iranian engineers looked at their fleet of aging Soviet BTR-50 personnel carriers and decided to turn them into something modern. The Makran is a heavily upgraded version of that vintage chassis, featuring a newly welded hull and a Rod unmanned turret armed with a 30mm autocannon. It is designed for naval infantry and amphibious operations along the coast, though Iran has rarely conducted the kind of major ship-to-shore assaults the vehicle was built for. Sayyad. This light tracked vehicle is essentially Iran's version of a militarized fast attack platform, combining domestic innovation with the DNA of the British Scorpion. It mounts machine guns or Tufan anti-tank missiles on a protected chassis designed for rapid movement and hit-and-run operations. The IRGC uses them for asymmetric warfare, where speed and surprise are more important than surviving direct hits, making it a perfect tool for a military that has spent decades preparing for irregular conflict. Tufan. After watching American MRAPs save lives against roadside bombs in Iraq and Afghanistan, Iran built their own mine-resistant vehicle. The Tufan uses a V-shaped hull to deflect blast energy and provides armored protection for up to 10 personnel against small arms and shrapnel. It shows that Iran learned the same brutal lessons about IED threats that drove Western vehicle development, creating a platform intended for both border security and high-intensity urban combat. Fate Q. This light infantry mobility vehicle serves as a fast, unarmored platform for moving troops and equipment quickly across varied terrain. It prioritizes mobility and payload over heavy protection, operating much like a military-grade utility vehicle for rapid deployment and logistics. It is not meant to trade fire on the front lines. It is meant to get supplies and special teams where they need to be before the fighting starts. Engineering and support vehicles. Safir Jeep. 36,000 of these light tactical vehicles have been cranked out since 2008, making it the most common set of wheels in the entire Iranian inventory. It is essentially a reverse-engineered copy of the American M38 Jeep, designed to be simple enough for a field mechanic to fix with a basic toolbox. While it offers zero protection against even small arms fire, its value lies in sheer numbers. Iran uses them for everything from hauling commanders to mounting rocket launchers and anti-tank missiles, proving that in a swarm, quantity has a quality all its own. Nenava. Logistics is rarely the part of the video that gets people excited, but this lightweight truck is the reason the Iranian front line stays fed and armed. Carrying up to 5 tons of cargo, the Nenava fills the same unglamorous role that the FMTV fills for American units. With 15,000 of them in service, it is the backbone of the Army's inland supply chain, designed to handle the brutal heat and rough terrain of the Iranian plateau without complaining. It is a 100% indigenous design, built for the reality of a war where you can't call for factory support when things go wrong. KAMAZ 43-114. Sometimes you need a heavy hitter to move the serious weight, and that is where this Russian 6x6 heavy truck comes in. Iran imports these because they need a platform capable of hauling heavy artillery, large missile components, and equipment that would snap a lighter truck in half. The partnership between Moscow and Tehran makes Western sanctions irrelevant here. Russia gets the cash, and Iran gets a rugged, multi-purpose platform that can ford rivers and climb gradients that would stop a civilian truck cold. It is a reminder that in the world of heavy logistics, Russian iron is still a standard that is hard to beat. Aris and Aris 2. Building a domestic utility vehicle is one thing, but iterating on the design shows a defense industry that is actually paying attention to the guys in the driver's seat. The Aras family is Iran's attempt to move away from reverse engineering old American designs and start building their own high mobility legacy. With 2,000 units in the motor pool, these multi-purpose vehicles do everything from moving special teams to mounting heavy anti-tank missiles like the Pirus. The Aras 2 improved on the original with better range and reliability, signaling that Iran is no longer content just keeping old gear alive. They want to build their own. Aras 3. The latest evolution of the family was unveiled in 2023 as a direct attempt to provide the Iranian military with their own version of a heavy-duty tactical vehicle. 1,000 of these are already hitting units, representing a commitment to self-sufficiency that overrides the convenience of importing from China or Russia. The Aras 3 is built to be a modular platform, capable of carrying everything from short-range air defense systems to command and control shelters. Samandar. Raids and reconnaissance require a vehicle where speed is the only armor you have, and the Samandar is built exactly for that hit-and-run reality. This light attack vehicle is a favorite for the IRGC and special operations units who need to move quickly across deserts and mountain passes. It mounts machine guns or other weapons on a stripped-down chassis that prioritizes power-to-weight ratio over crew comfort. Kaviran and Seper. Iran operates several of these light utility programs at once to ensure they never have to depend on a single foreign supplier. These are simple 4x4 platforms designed for the unglamorous work of moving small teams or mounting light rocket launchers across the Iranian plateau. They represent a military that has learned to stop looking for a universal solution and instead build basic tools for the specific mountains and deserts they actually have to defend. Ranger. This is essentially a militarized dune buggy designed for the kind of hit-and-run raids where speed is the only armor you can afford. Inspired by the utility of civilian all-terrain vehicles, the Ranger is built to move special operations teams across broken ground where a standard truck would get high-centered or bogged down. It offers zero protection, but in a military built on asymmetric warfare, the ability to strike fast and disappear is often more valuable than thick steel. Moving on to artillery. Iranian mortar family. This massive inventory of over 2,000 tubes is the ultimate insurance policy for a military that expects to fight in some of the most rugged mountains on Earth. Iran fields mortars in 5 different calibers, ranging from the 37mm, which is essentially a man-portable, glorified grenade launcher, to the heavy 160mm monsters that hit with the authority of a howitzer. In the tight alleys of an urban fight or the deep shadows of the Zagros Mountains, a mortar is often the only support system that can drop high explosives on a target that a tank or a jet simply cannot see. Fajr 1. Taking a Chinese design and mass producing it by the thousands has given Iran the ability to turn a grid square into a smoking crater in under a minute. 1,300 of these 107mm launchers are scattered across the country, towed by jeeps, hidden in tree lines, or bolted to the back of pickup trucks. These are the lawnmower engines of the artillery world, cheap, loud, and designed to overwhelm an enemy with a wall of steel rather than surgical precision. BM-21 Grad. The Soviet Union built the Grad to redefine the meaning of saturation fire, and the Iranian military has leaned on these 122mm launchers since the 1980s. The math of 40 rockets in 20 seconds is a terrifying reality that any ground force has to respect. While the trucks themselves may be veterans of the war with Iraq, the physics of a rocket barrage has not changed. It is designed to turn a staging area into a wasteland, and displace before the first return shell finds the launch site. Fajr 3. When the smaller rockets do not carry enough punch to crack a hardened bunker, Iranian commanders reach for this heavy hitter. The Fajr 3 fires 12 large 240mm rockets that carry enough high explosive to level command posts that smaller systems would barely scratch. With a reach that pushes past 40 kilometers, these launchers are strategic assets designed to strike deep behind enemy lines and hit the supply chains that a modern invader depends on. 2S-1 Gvozdika. This tracked Soviet veteran was built to ensure that artillery fire stays right on the heels of an armored advance. Iran keeps the Gvozdika running because a gun that can shoot and relocate is worth 10 towed pieces that are sitting ducks for counter-battery fire. It is also a rare swimmer, an amphibious howitzer that can cross rivers without waiting for engineers to build a bridge, making it a persistent nuisance that refuses to stay in one place. M109A1. Before the revolution, the Shah bought the gold standard of American mobile artillery, and today these systems are still some of the most reliable pieces in the Iranian motor pool. They are cramped, the electronics are ancient, and they probably smell like a refinery fire, but they still deliver heavy 155mm rounds exactly where they are needed. Through sheer mechanical stubbornness, Iran has manufactured its own shells and parts to keep these Cold War classics in the fight long after the rest of the world expected them to rot. Rod 2. This is the Persian Thunder, a domestically produced, self-propelled howitzer that looks like an American Paladin but runs on a chassis inspired by a Soviet tank. Iranian engineers took the best of both worlds, mounting a 155mm gun on a platform that can handle the brutal heat of the Iranian desert. It is not an attempt to win a technology race. It is a pragmatic solution to a logistics problem, providing Iran with a heavy, mobile gun that they can build, repair, and operate entirely in-house. M107. The United States built this 175mm beast for the Vietnam War, and today, it remains one of the longest-range guns in the Iranian inventory. Laying the piece is an old-school art form. The gunner has to give hand signals to the driver, who watches him in the left rearview mirror to make the tiny steering bar adjustments needed to aim the entire vehicle. These are high-strung machines that can literally shoot themselves to death because the early barrels were known to fail after only 80 rounds. M1978. Known as the Koksan, this North Korean monster is essentially a massive coastal defense gun that someone decided to bolt onto a tank chassis. It is an awkward, open-mount platform that does not even carry its own ammunition, requiring a second support vehicle to follow it around like a caddy. In 2008, a group of US Marines actually found one of these abandoned on a university campus in Iraq. They tried to take it home as a trophy before realizing it was too much of a nightmare to move and ended up melting the breech with a thermite grenade. Much of the long-range technology in this museum of fire exists because of Gerald Bull, a Canadian mad scientist who sold base bleed shell technology to Tehran to fund his dream of shooting satellites into space. You have American guns from the 50s sitting next to Soviet pieces from the 80s and Chinese copies of Russian designs. None of these guns share parts, and keeping them running is a logistics nightmare. But if you can point a barrel at the enemy and pull the lanyard, it is a threat that an invader has to respect.